My guest today is Pritchard. This guy's been to 17 treatment centers in his addiction career. He comes all the way from Birmingham, Alabama. He's got a pretty powerful story, and I'd like to hear him share it with all of us. So, Adams, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Birmingham, Alabama.
Yep.
You had a good flight coming in today?
It was great.
All right. So the show is, the Unbroken Stories of Resilience, which means that folks that come on here evidently have had some brokenness. How did you get here? Like, what did it look like being Adams when you were little and when you got introduced to whatever you were introduced to? Help me understand that.
Honestly, I wouldn't change one thing for what all my experience I think was a gift. Because I really believe that people like you and me shouldn't be sitting here. Like, we just shouldn't be breathing. It doesn't make sense. So I think that the fact that we are is because, there's a purpose for us. There's something really special for us to go do. And what a gift it is, that we've gotten connected with that purpose and are out here doing that. And once you start living like that, I mean, just the fear and all that goes away. It's like we're on borrowed time. And, so I'm so grateful to be doing that today. How I got here, I was given the gift of having the gene of alcoholism and drug addiction. And
Now, do you think it was a gene, or do you have a history of family trauma, generational, or what did the backstory look like with the family?
I have family members that have alcoholism and drug addiction. It skipped a generation. A bunch of my cousins, and I, got the gene, and I don't really believe alcoholism and drug addiction is causal. I think you've either got the gene or you don't, and I'm grateful to have it. And mine showed up at an early age. When I was 15 years old. If you looked at me from the outside looking in, you would have thought, man, like, this guy is super happy. I was really good at sports. I did well in school. I was around a lot of people. But inside, like, from a young age, something just felt kind of off. Didn't know what it was. Therapists, people like that, was it anxiety? Was it what? I just remember when I was 15 years old, I would get so nervous at school before practices for football and basketball games. Like, I would get sick to my stomach. And I remember around that time was the first time I drank a few Coors Lights and smoked a joint, and was just like, good God. I mean, for the first time in my life, I can breathe. This knot in my stomach is gone. I don't know what happened, but as long as we can do this, have some kind of relief anesthetic for the rest of our life, like, we can do anything. And it rolled on, and how this thing's progressive, it reared its head. 17 years old, I had my first drug overdose.
17 years old, you had your first drug overdose. What was that? What was that from? What was that situation?
I ate like 50 or 60 7.5 milligram Lortabs and drank about. I only know that because I had a bunch of bottles, and I could see how many were in each one, and I know what I started the day with, and I know what I ended up in the hospital with.
Was it intentional?
No, I started partying. I was watching the Alabama-UConn game in the Elite Eight at the lake with one of my best friends, and it was just us. And I had a handle of Jack Daniels and a bunch of Lortabs, and then I ended up, I don't remember much of what happened.
7.5 Lortabs. That's a lot of Tylenol for 7.5 milligrams of the actual drug. I mean, that's a lot of Tylenol that goes along with that too.
And I remember later that night waking up in the hospital. And I had a bunch more, and they were from heroin and fentanyl and Xanax and all that kind of stuff. But that was the start of it. And, I had some interventions early on.
But what did let's back up a minute. What did your family, what was their reaction when you had an overdose at 17? Like, did they already know something was going on, or?
Yeah, they knew something was going on, and then they just started getting scared, like, how come you're so much different than, because all my friends were wild, but, like, there was something different with me. And they just didn't know what to do, and they were scared to death, and, God bless them.
What was their reaction? I mean, what did what actions did they take when you were in the hospital at 17? What'd they do moving forward to try and control and manage or fix or keep you safe? Did
I mean, they were mad.
Anything?
Yeah, they were mad. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my mom, my dad, my sister around me, kind of like screaming, crying, the next day when I was kind of back to reality and just like, this can't happen anymore, and I was mad, and I was just like, kind of dig my heels in the ground and like, yeah, this won't happen again. I'm sorry, and I really was.
Did you mean it when you said this won't happen again? Like,
I did.
You meant it? And you were scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know why I was different than everybody else.
Right.
Why I couldn't just take 5 Lortabs and drink a couple mixed drinks and go home,
Right. So what did it look like from there?
It kept getting worse and worse. Started messing around with other stuff, more stuff. I had some interventions early on.
What did that look like?
Having people kind of corner up on me and you're going to go do this.
Was it professionally run? You had professional interventionists come in and say, hey, did the family set boundaries or?
Yeah, people helping my family out. And I had this big, long gap after kind of like the first wave of them where I was not in any kind of treatment for about 7 years or so. And I graduated from college somehow, and I started a career, and I was self-sufficient enough to where people just kind of left me alone.
What were you doing for work?
I was a mortgage loan originator, and, I was young and I was making enough money to get by. And I'll never forget, like, this one morning I was driving to work. It was a beautiful, beautiful morning. Like, the sun was kind of coming up over the city of downtown Birmingham, and the bank I worked for was in the south side of downtown Birmingham. And as I was coming up over the hill, this wave of emotions hit me that I had never felt before. It was really foreign to me, and I started crying. And I had this realization for the first time that I could no longer live with alcohol and drugs, but I also couldn't live without them. And I was just kind of confused. I was like, man, I've tried this recovery stuff and it didn't work. There's obviously something different going on with me. Maybe I'm depressed. I don't know what it is. And I was thinking about the other people that I spent a lot of time around, and their lives were really starting to take a much different trajectory than mine was. And so,
and these are guys that you had partied with, but they were still kind of
just, things were happening way different in their life than it was in mine.
Right. So if I can back up a little bit for all of the interventions that you had, like, and you said the family set boundaries. Did those boundaries relax after you got out of treatment? Were they just using boundaries just to get you in treatment, and then they would go back to doing whatever they did?
They kind of relaxed since I graduated from college, like was getting my college done, right, and getting a job and all that. And I was surviving without having to continue, getting lifted back up. Like they knew it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't as bad as it had been.
So what boundaries did they set with you? Like, what did it look like when they would intervene on you? What did the boundaries look like, or how were they enabling you afterwards?
Well, now that I know, being on this side, they weren't great, because I did continue getting some help that probably shouldn't have been there. Mm-hmm. But it, I kind of say this, it may get a little, like, I really believe the only reason I'm still alive is because my mom and dad, at the end of the day, I think they went with their gut instead of the super tough love stuff. And if they'd have gone with the super tough love stuff, I don't think I would still be here.
What would have been super tough love to you? Like, what? Explain
just
more.
Completely cut off, go figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I would have died.
You think so?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, but after that gap, and then that happened to me that morning, and I got connected with the HR department at the bank I was working for. And since I had been there for a long enough amount of time, I could get FMLA leave of absence. And so it was the first time ever that I sought out some help on my own, because I knew something was wrong. And so I went up, you said earlier, 17 treatment centers. I did go to 17 treatment centers. If you add in sober livings and detoxes and all that, it's way more. This time I went to and I'm going to try to keep the names of all those places out. I went to a real bougie place up in the Northeast, and I'm from Alabama. So I flew up there, and after about 17 days, I remember, so I'm off the alcohol, the benzos, the cocaine, and the heroin. And physically, I started feeling a little better. I was finally eating. I was finally sleeping. I was exercising. I was hitting on girls. Like, my body was coming back. But I couldn't figure out why, even though I chose to go there, all I could think about the entire time was going to the airport and getting a few drinks and flying back to Birmingham and getting a fix. And I was like, man, where's the magic wand? Like, how come this is not getting any better? Little did I know that there's so many problems in treatment right now that I was not given an adequate, representation of what alcoholism, what drug addiction is, and what the solution is. And so I was so confused, though, on why nothing was happening. I listened to every single thing they told me to do, and so did my family when I left that time. I came back to Birmingham. I extended my leave of absence. I went to a sober living. I had a sponsor. I was going to an IOP. I was going to 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm doing all the stuff the sober living's asked me to do. I'm doing all the stuff now what I know was a middle of the road sponsorship was asking me to do, which was just to call this person a lot. And they really meant well. They just didn't know what they were doing either. And I was worn out with how much I was doing to get better, and I wasn't getting better.
So you weren't like actively working and changing this internal constitution that you live your life by. So you're talking about the problems in treatment. Like what happened
in treatment? So I'm doing a lot of breathing. I'm doing a lot of group therapy. I'm working on a lot of relapse prevention stuff.
What is, you did a lot of breathing. Like I did a lot of breathing when I was smoking crack too.
Yeah.
When I was snorting coke and eating pills, I was doing a lot of breathing. I'm breathing now.
Yeah.
But what was the other things that they did?
Relapse prevention.
What was the relapse prevention like? What was their practice?
I mean, in this, I did a lot of them. This one was like I Am Knighted by Terrence Gorski, the person that was taking me through it in this book that was like, damn college
Terry
course.
G.
Yeah.
Terry
it was
G.
insane. Yep. And I did it, and it was just kind of all the normal stuff that we're programmed to believe this is and what you're supposed to do to get out of it, which doesn't work for people like us,
mm-hmm.
And
I did that Terrence G. Relapse prevention stuff where I went. I mean, that's where I went the last time, and they were a hardcore program and highly accountable, very structured. But the executive director at that program at the time incorporated this relapse prevention, and there were these cards that you filled out, and I don't even remember the questions, but I'm like 6 months into this treatment program. The fog is clearing a little bit, but even then I knew that, like, wait a minute. You're telling me that when the desire or the obsession comes back and starts talking to me and telling me that, hey, maybe I could just smoke a 20 of crack cocaine, that I'm supposed to pull out these cards and read them or write down, and that's gonna put me back in the right direction. I'm like, man, my brain doesn't operate that way. My experience doesn't operate that way. Like when the obsession is on and my mind starts lying to me and telling me that, hey, maybe you can just pull off $20 worth of crack cocaine, it's too late. I'm going,
I'll tell you, one time I was at a place, this high-end sober living, and there was a guy that stayed there for 13 months. And I remember around 12 months or so, because I was not there that long, but I was at the tail end of his time there. And I said, well, why are you here for 13 months? And he said, well, I got to finish this relapse prevention book with the therapist that's helping me get through it. And once I finish that, they tell me I'm going to be ready to go. And he was a member in a church. So he was in the clergy at some church somewhere. like pretty high up. And he finished the thing. He got out. He got drunk. He beat up his sister, and he came right back.
What was he lacking, you think?
He was never shown the process on how to recover from alcoholism. He never connected to the power that would take that obsession away. He never cleaned up any wreckage of his past. He never helped any other alcoholics. It was just, there was a lot.
Yeah.
So if we get back to all that, I mean, I was just kind of doing what's out there right now in traditional treatment circles. And then when I came back, which is what's in normal transition circles, and it's not effective.
Sober living, IOP.
Sober living,
I mean,
IOP.
that's the standard. You go to 30 days of treatment, then you got to go to IOP, and then, sober living. It's just boom, boom, boom.
And you got to get a sponsor, and you got to do 9 meetings in 90 days. Little, did I know back then that most of what's out there in 12-step land is not the 12 steps, right? It's just calling somebody every day and going to a bunch of meetings. That's not the program. Is the 12 steps. That wasn't it, right? Mm-hmm. This IOP stuff, I'm really, sitting around just talking about problems with a bunch of people, seeing a therapist once a month. Some doctor comes through there once a month to check on everybody's meds, and I didn't know that was all just set up so people could bill insurance companies. You know what I mean? And nothing was shown to me about, once again, what alcoholism, what drug addiction was, and what the solution was. And I was doing so much, and I got so worn out in all that stuff. And I'll never forget, the day came where it was time for me to go back to work. And I was driving into my office that morning, and I felt worse that morning than I did when I had my meltdown 2 months before that. And I was just like, man, what is wrong with me? And I didn't know all I was experiencing in that moment was severe untreated alcoholism and untreated drug addiction. I didn't know what that was and what it looked like. I was so scared. I was an emotional train wreck. I almost kind of hid as I was going back in the door. And I was a loan originator, so I had a team of people covering my origination pipeline while I was gone. So in theory, all I had to do was go back in there, make contact. I would get origination credit again. I could live life. But I was so in that untreated state, I couldn't send an email. I couldn't pick up the phone and call anybody. I didn't even want to get out of my office and go to the bathroom because I cannot see or talk to anyone in here. And, I couldn't do it. It's just, that's existing in life with no power. So what did I do? I called my drug dealer, had to meet me across the street at the gas station. And while I'm waiting on the drop, I was chugging a 4 Locos in a brown paper bag behind a dumpster in a suit, get the drop, going through the back door, snort a couple different colors of powder up my nose. And I went back to my office and I sat down at my desk. In that moment, I felt exactly what Bill Wilson described when he drank right after the stock market crash. There's this line where he says, that old fierce determination when came back. And buddy, it was on. I was sending a million emails. I was making a ton of phone calls, setting up all kind of stuff. I was running around the office, high-fiving everybody, sitting down with them. Sam, what up, man? How's life? How are the kids? God, I had Lyme disease. That's what they thought. It was awful, but I am back. Let's go make some money. It's on.
You told them that you had to go. They didn't know you were in treatment.
Right.
They thought you were gone for Lyme.
Yeah. I mean, they probably knew, but that's what, I kind of bought into the lie.
Yeah, you went in and said, yeah, man, I got Lyme disease. I'm going to have to go away for a little while. And you turn your back, and they're like, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah. So, but it was on. In that day, I felt like God's cousin, and I got a ton of work done, super productive, super effective. But, knowing now, since this disease is so progressive, the next day, it wasn't quite the same. I didn't quite get the same relief. And then I start overshooting the mark. And then I start not being where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there, and the train fell off the tracks.
And as classy as that is, to be behind the dumpster with the 4 Loco in your suit, did you know then, did you have an inclination that this isn't going to end well? When you were behind the dumpster in your suit?
I really believe that it doesn't even come into mind because I need power and I need relief so bad. And that's the only thing that's going to give it to me. And I got blinders on that I've got to go get okay to go do life. I tell families all the time when they're so frustrated their loved one is going back to treatment, and they're like, God, how could they do this to us again? And I'm like, how could they not, when all that keeps happening is to them is they go to treatment where they're separated from their magical anesthetic to do life, and they're left without a solution in that treatment bubble. It's like me taking away your air supply, and hey, all of a sudden you can't breathe. You're going to be fighting to take a breath, and that's how I was going through life and experiencing life.
How many disease concept models of treatment did you go to in your journey of 17 programs? Like, how many times? And disease concept model of treatment is it's lectures, it's lectures on the brain. You get the King Baby. Did you ever do King? How many times did you have to do
that's
King
all
Baby, man?
that's all it was. And you can learn about that until you're blue in the face, but it's not going to change anything. Like I need to understand the disease of alcoholism, and I need to understand the physical allergy and all this stuff, but like the spiritual malady, the mental obsession. But until I'm given a solution where that spiritual malady is overcome and that obsession is removed, I have no shot. And it's a real issue. But eventually, as the train fell off the tracks again, I went across the country on that next FMLA leave of absence. I went way down south. I ended up out in the middle of the country. I was given an opportunity to take, a 6-month leave of absence and go start working in another part of the country where they were opening up a new shop. And so I said, hell yeah, I'll do that. Sounds great. And while I was on that journey, I was in and out of more treatment centers and sober livings and detoxes because they weren't working. And I got introduced to some people at the end of that were doing some stuff that was different than what I had ever been exposed to before, which was being in a treatment center where they were, they were still doing some somewhat normal stuff, but I was presented with a solution to alcoholism in treatment for the first time in my life. And it was a presentation I'd never seen, some really old school 12-step stuff with a little bit of clinical and medical. And it changed my life. And it was enough of a taste, and that place is not there anymore, but it was enough of a taste to get this thing, where I went out and I sought it out after that. Sought out something that I didn't even know existed. And that's what my life has become about since then. Is, seeking out the solution to life. And, not only has it changed my life, it's changed a lot of others. Because the guy that was kind of, behind that place when it got sold, he and I teamed up and collaborated to go kind of do something to kind of go back to doing that grassroots movement. And that's what I'm sitting here, doing today.
So I want to touch on the family, because I think a lot of the audience are family members of, have addiction in their lives, and certainly people in recovery too. But like through all of that journey, what was your family doing and what were they saying? And did they play a role in your final success of getting sober?
Yes. So, and it's crazy that you asked that, because I think about what we do now for families and what they got when I was there. They didn't get anything when I was there. It's just that I finally got better. And since they're so connected to me, there was a ripple effect on them. And they ended up seeking out some stuff from my experience that helped them after the fact. But they never got what they needed through all of that. And it's so unfortunate, because, I went to the finest places in the country and were working with the best, therapists and family people out there, and they never got what they needed through that whole thing. It was after, I got some stuff and was able to get them plugged up with it. There was just really, it's kind of like this hidden hidden secret, because the people I know in your field, most of them, they're not giving these families it's very rare. You're like a unicorn out there. It's sad.
It's a family illness.
Yeah.
The whole family needs to be treated. Now, you said they didn't get what they needed. You mean you went some of the top of the line treatment centers of the best that are out here today or back in that day. And how long have you been sober?
7 years.
7 years. So went to the best of the best, and they weren't doing anything with the family?
Just to go back with what you were talking about earlier, just that same old kind of like, we'll sit in here and we'll talk to you about the brain and all that kind of stuff.
Lectures.
Right. No individualized work for them to do to get relief.
Man, why are we still showing up that way? We, as the field of behavioral health, because we'll get into a second that you work in behavioral health, you own your own place, and I'm excited to talk about it. Why are we still doing that? Why is that? And you know what annoys me is you see all over social and LinkedIn and everywhere of, I'm now representing this best place and all the premier place, and we're doing all of this stuff and that, and it's the same thing over and over. Why are we still doing that?
So I think it's just going to keep getting worse now that I'm on this side of it and see how misguided and misled the population of the treatment industry is in the work, and how, so most people don't really know what the real solution is, and they're not effective in helping people get something plugged up to that they're not plugged up to. And it's also now it's so the motivating factor and driving force for most people getting into this field is profit.
There are those, and there are quite a few of those, that are of the mindset and the belief that the 12 steps have no place in inpatient treatment. They say that you can get them for free. That's for someone to do once they get out. You can get them for free. Go to a meeting, church basement, put $1 in the basket, and voila, there's your 12 steps, that they have no place in treatment. What I have seen is there's two types of programs that talk about the 12 steps inside of their residential treatment facility. There's a 12-step introduction. When families call and talk to, are y'all 12 step? Well, we're 12-step based is what they call them, 12-step based. And that's really just an introduction into the 12 steps. That's they'll have some people come in, bring an outside meeting inside. You may get a big book. You can read it or you don't have to. At the end, they'll give you a marble and tell you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, get a sponsor, blah, 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 and send you on your way. It's like an introduction.
Yeah.
Well, I was introduced to an engineer the other day, and that didn't make me an engineer, right? I was just introduced.
Great analogy,
to one.
yeah.
I had to go, if I want to be an engineer, I got to immerse myself into the process of becoming an engineer. And then there's the other type of inpatient program that speak of the 12 steps, and that's a 12-step immersion. Those are the types of programs that you wake up in the morning, and from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, you are spoon-fed the program of recovery and the principles behind the 12 steps. You study the book, you break it down, you actually work all 12 steps, and then they have clinical aside from that, or in addition to that, to help process all of that as it's going on. There's many people that say the 12 steps have no place in treatment, and I am not one of those people. I am not one of those people that believes that. What saved my life was an immersion into the 12-step process, because I wasn't disciplined enough to go through the 12 steps on my own in the free world. I had too many distractions, and quite honestly, it was a watered-down message that I was getting.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what they were talking about. So for people like me, it was good because I was in a safe, structured environment, and I was spoon-fed the program of recovery. I was held accountable. I was having an experience. What that did is it allowed an experience, and it was a painful experience. And then the clinicians were there to help me process that experience and to help me make sense of that experience and to help tie in my family dynamics and my history and the trauma and help incorporate all of that into this just ball of wellness.
Yeah.
Right? That's where, and in my professional work as an interventionist and the programs that I see that do that, that is where I've seen the most success.
Yeah. And I mean, it really, golly, there's so much I was thinking about when you were saying all that. So, number one, like the reason I think, so there's problems right now in treatment and there's problems in the fellowship. So for the ones that just like, hey, we're 12-step base, which that's really BS. If they don't get it while they're in treatment, 99% chance they're not going to get it when they leave. And so if alcoholism and drug addiction, it's a 3-part problem, right? Mind, body, spirit. So if we break that down, if we start at the bottom with the spirit, that spiritual malady, same thing as untreated alcoholism, same thing as untreated drug addiction. What that is when A, I don't have the substances in my body, and then B, I have not yet been through a process to recover. So in that state of being, I'm having problems with my personal relationships. I can't control my emotional nature. I'm a prey to misery and depression. I'm full of fear. I feel kind of useless. I'm probably having some problems at work. I'm just super restless, real irritable, real discontent. And so that fires and is connected to the mental piece, which is really, this obsession of the mind that I don't have a choice. In that state, I have no choice but to go back to the substances because it's the only thing that's going to give me relief from that broken internal condition. And once I go back to it, it activates the part with the body, this phenomenon of craving, this physical allergy, and I lose control, right? Can't tell you for when I'm going to stop, what's going to happen, yada, yada, yada. So when in most treatment circles, like all that's really happening is like we're going to address the physical, if they even do, to get them off of the substances, which a lot of them don't anymore. So we're going to address the physical, but we're going to leave the spirit untouched, right? And if the spirit's connected to the mind, we can't do any work with the mind on the clinical side unless the spirit starts to wake up.
Because we got to get to a certain level of honesty about ourselves in order for the message to get through.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you're talking about, like from your experience, what you were saying is like that spirit was starting to wake up, and that's when you could work on the family dynamics and the trauma, and that's the only effective way, from my experience and from what I see now, for this thing to work, for it to come full circle. That's what we do today.
But what is we? Let's get into that. So you sobered up. You got a little time under your belt. Your spirit is awakened. You rebuilt your internal constitution. Life starts to become wide open. What happened?
So in about a year interval, I took 64 people through the 12 steps just out in the free world. And what I started to realize was, man, people are going to go to treatment. You know what I mean? And they are not getting better in treatment. And a lot of those 64, like a lot of them couldn't stick, and we were going through them quick. It wasn't fast enough, though, for them to get in the free world. Now some of them did, some of them didn't. And I started kind of trying to think, like, well, how can this be done better to get more done in treatment to where these guys have a shot when they go back out into life? And the guy that really was kind of, one of the main ones running the place that I went to when I got a taste of this stuff, that place had gotten bought, which is what happens every day in our field.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and it changed, and a private equity company comes in, and they, start doing more with insurance and, 10x the bed size, and he was starting to get frustrated, and we started collaborating on, like, man, why don't we go do this, stay pure? So we'll go to a different market, and we just did it where I'm from, in Birmingham, Alabama, where this has never really existed. And we were real purpose driven on how we could do it, keep it pure, keep insurance out of it, stay small, be effective.
And why do you want to keep insurance out of it?
Because
everybody's looking, I got my insurance. You take insurance? Yeah. You take insurance? I need to use my insurance. Like, why do you not want to use insurance?
Because they dictate everything you do. It's like Chad, my partner says, like, he got so tired of where he was at some insurance executive telling him how little Johnny, what he needed to recover from alcoholism. That guy has no clue, not knocking him. And it's great for people, that's their only option is to go use their insurance to get separated somewhere. That's a start, right? So we started collaborating on how can we go do this where we can create a bubble where these guys can do, what they need to do in that bubble to get well and then go plug and play when they leave and not have to figure it all out. And so, that's what we did.
What do you mean plug and play? What do you mean?
They are hitting the ground running. They've done the
what
heavy
is hitting the ground running. I'm putting you
so
on
they've done the work. Maybe why don't I can I describe what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So here's what we do. We've got a program and a process where guys do three things while they're with us. One, they work all 12 steps, and it's not meetings, and it's not the mainstream 12-step stuff that's unfortunately 99% of what's out there today. It's how these people were working the steps themselves when this process originated. And so, in conjunction with that, we have a really individualized clinical component because it's not driven by what they can do to get reimbursed from insurance. It's what's going on with each person. And so as these clients are working, going through this authentic 12-step process, just like you talked about in your experience, their spirit's starting to wake up. And as their spirit starts to wake up, that's when they're finally in a position to be receptive to working through all this stuff on the clinical side that keeps jamming them up, all the trauma, all the, whatever family, that all that stuff. And they can get through it. And it's just a powerful way to do it. And then the third thing we do is call it Impactful Families. And we do stuff 3 times a week with the families over the phone and virtually so that they can, one, get relief because we take them through the Al-Anon 12 steps. It's not an Al-Anon meeting. It is a work group where we're taking them through the work. Took a long time to create a way to do that, and we finally cracked the nut. And it was not me; it was some other people on our team that are incredible that unlocked that piece. And then 2, we have weekly coaching sessions with the families, and they're really powerful because those families are also doing work on their end, and they really are able to connect those dots. And then the third thing we do is their loved one's therapist starts giving them some prep work for them to do on their end so that after their loved one completes their 5th step, which is usually about the 3rd week with us, they can do either an in-person or virtual family session where they get a lot done. And so that's what happens, in our 35-day residential window. And, most of our clients go to our transition and to complete our whole program. Some leave after that 35 days because they're not able to continue, but everyone that has the chance, usually wants to go finish this extra 30 to 60 days in our transition, where when they go over there, they have a coach, a recovery coach, and a therapist. And they are actually going out into the world and cleaning up these harms, the wreckage of their past, and getting free. And they're starting to help other alcoholics and drug addicts. And, we have it where they're going to these wind-up joints where people end up and they're carrying the message.
Wind-up joint. What's a wind-up joint?
A hospital, an institution, a sober living, a treatment center. And all the groups over there are geared towards helping them teach this stuff so they can eventually be a super effective sponsor, helping other alcoholics and drug addicts through the 12-step process of recovery out in the free world, because that's what this is really all about. And then their therapist in that transition, they are able to do some really deep trauma work over there because these guys, the spirit's waking up more every day. And they're really able to get down into the deep rooted stuff. And they also work on a lot of family dynamic stuff over there. And, in that short amount of time, 30 to 60 days, those guys are over there. I mean, we're talking max, somebody's in our program for 95 days. They're doing way more than a year's worth of work. And so then, they're on fire. We want them to carry that momentum and go out into the world and kick some butt. We're not trying to keep them in this holding pattern, for all this time with this huge amount of runway where they're really not doing anything. We want them to get through all the stuff, get through it quick, and, bust the door down to go rebuild their life and go recreate their life. And, and when they do that, it takes off, and they transform. And, every single day I get to hear from those guys when they're out there in the world doing their thing. And, I watch the same thing that happened in my life, where God just fills it up, happens to each and every one of those guys that does this. And I believe it's so the next person can see that and say, I want a piece of that. That's just like, because my experience all those years was I continued to see people that they were still struggling. They were abstinent from substances, but life did not look super, wow, I want what this guy has, right? All I was around for the longest time was people that were still recovering. They were still, it was a fight one day at a time. It was a struggle.
You hear that stuff,
yeah.
man. I see it on social media all the time. Oh, I'll keep praying for y'all. I know it's a fight every day. And I'm like, man, if I'm going to be fighting every day, I'm going to be loaded doing it, because what's the purpose of going through life fighting?
A friend of mine was on a big interview on a big platform a couple weeks ago, and I was watching it. And the lady asked him this question. She said, so, how do you continue to do this fight every single day? What is the battle like? And I sat there and laughed and then wanted to throw my computer across the room.
What was his response?
Luckily he was able to redirect the conversation because he had done this, and that's what I thought, though, for the longest time this was going to be. And I was like, man, I want no part of that. I would rather die out here than struggle for the rest of my life. And thank God I finally met a few people that had actually recovered from this disease and saw what they had and was like, I want a piece of that. And so, we've now gotten to become a catalyst for that, in this sector, in this industry, but also every single one of us that are involved in our organization. That's what we do in our free time out in the real world for just regular people. And we named ourselves Impact Recovery Center. We're in Birmingham, Alabama, because we wanted to do two things. We wanted to impact treatment and impact just the fellowship in the world in general, so that, our guys are out there, they're little cheerleaders helping people that are just out in the world wherever they are, in all walks of life. A lot of people don't have, a gift like this to be able to come do something like this. And that's what started to happen, and the momentum's just building more and more every single day. Hey, y'all, I hate to interrupt. Hope you like what you're hearing. If you do, call us. I'm Adams. I help start Impact, and we're here to help.
So you're taking guys. How many guys do y'all hold? How big's your place?
So we take 14 in the residential phase and 12 in the transition phase right now.
All right. So you got 14 in your spot.
Yeah.
And it's really relaxed. I've been there. I've seen it. It's a good feel. It's a relaxed feel. You're taking an individual, you're meeting them where they are. You're taking that individual, as they say, steel on steel. As iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. So you guys are just guys with a solution that are giving your experience strength and hope to those other guys. Clinicians are helping process that experience. You're really doing individualized care with clinicians, and you're also taking the families through the step work as well. What type of success are you seeing?
It's super high. What we see is guys that just do the 35-day phase one. It's about a little over 50%. Guys that go do 30 to 60 days of phase two, it jumps to 80%.
Did really buy in and get into that phase two. What's your biggest obstacle out here? What do you feel like gets in the way outside of your control?
In as far as
someone getting well,
the biggest obstacles I see are the families, right? Like that kind of like how I described with my own experience, like when I was not well, right, but I was holding it together. Um, had I been intervened on sooner, it could have been a little bit because there was already enough there. Like I had already reached my surrender, and it just kept going and going and going and going. So I think a lot of times, and I mean, I think you see that too. You talk to families like, and you're hearing them describe their loved one that's dealing with this thing, and like, man, the time is now, but they kick the can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, now because of this contaminated drug supply we have, the ones that are messing around with drugs, a lot of times they never get that chance because they die.
I understand that we can't get someone well if they aren't alive. But where the ball is dropped, I think, is they go and it's like, man, I got to get on some Suboxone, I got to get on some Sublocade, I got to get on something, I got to do something, I got to stay alive. And so they get on that, and then the families are like, cool, found a solution. That's it. They haven't done a damn thing to rebuild this internal constitution that they're living by, right? They haven't done a damn thing to treat that. Next thing you know, in comes alcohol, or in comes Xanax, or in comes weed, or in comes infidelity, or in comes sex addiction, or in comes gambling. Here comes, we're looking for anything to fill this because there's not a pill out there. There's not a pill, there's not a pharmaceutical out there that will rebuild this internal constitution. Well, Adams, thank you for coming all the way from Alabama to sit and talk about some treatment, your story, 12 steps, recovery, some uncomfortable stuff, some of it that can be controversial. I'm all right with that. I'm cool with that. I think we need discussions like this. That wraps it up for today, y'all. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. And always remember, be good to yourselves. Take it easy.